A young American man was found dead in Mexico. The question is, was it an accident or was this a murder? Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Jayson Artis. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you are new to the channel, I tell multiple true crime stories every single week here on YouTube, so please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok on a couple different pages. Please feel free to check those out if you want to. The links to those are in the link tree in the description of this video below. They will also pop up here at some point in the beginning and at the end of the video. Also in that link tree below, you will find my merch store. We sell t-shirts and hoodies and stuff like that. We ship all over this wonderful planet, so feel free to check that out too if you like. And then lastly, if there's a case you want me to cover, just send me a really quick email. All you need to know is the name of the individual or the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add it to my list. The list is well over 6,100 names long right now. I pick the cases I cover each time at random, so I can't promise you when I'll cover that case, but I will get to it eventually. At any rate, let's get into today's case. Hoorah. What? Stop. Okay. Jayson Lloyd Artis. He was born on November 26, 1977, and he was born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia. But after he graduated high school, he would move from Virginia all the way to Los Angeles, California to attend college. And when this case occurs, he is 20 years old. He is also one of, I think, at least 2 or 3 siblings. His younger brother, Steven, still lived in Virginia, and in July of 1998, Jayson would actually fly Steven out to Los Angeles so that he could spend a week with him and kind of tour the area of LA. And for about a week or so, they did just that. They toured around. They saw all the hot spots. Jayson took his brother around and just showed him everything. But before Jayson was to fly his brother back to Virginia, he said, well, I want to do one more thing with you. I want to show you the party life. And specifically, he was going to take him past the U.S. border into Mexico and to show him the party scene of Tijuana, Mexico. Back especially in the 90s, Tijuana, or as people who are originally from San Diego, we refer to it as TJ, it was absolutely a location that many people in San Diego and Los Angeles would go to party because their drinking ages and their drinking laws weren't as strong as they are here, and they weren't really as enforced. I don't really know if that's changed or not, but back then, like a 19 or 20-year-old could go to Tijuana and drink without any issues. So it was August 1st, 1998. They would go down to Tijuana with also one of Jayson's friends. His friend's name was Michael. The three of them were hopping around to various different bars. It was super crowded. A lot of people, a lot of college kids from the States were there, and they were having a fun time. They were drinking a lot, and no one discounts the fact that Jayson himself was pretty intoxicated that night. Pretty much all three of them were, but like no one is denying that he wasn't. They were at one bar, and Jayson was offered shots by a bartender there, and he didn't realize until afterwards, after he did 2 of these shots, that each shot was like $6. So when the bartender said, hey, that'll be $12, he's like, what the fuck? Like, what? I didn't know how much these cost. He became really upset. He argued with the bartender, but eventually they just gave the money to the bartender, and the 3 of them left this bar. Jayson and Steve left the bar around 1 o'clock in the morning, but Jayson's friend Michael stayed behind. Jayson and Steve were then, at that point, trying to find their car. Steve was sort of intoxicated, but he wasn't like super drunk, and so the plan, I think, was for him to drive. But at some point, while walking down this very crowded, very busy street, Jayson accidentally bumps into a female police officer, and she immediately gives him shit for it. And as a matter of fact, because there's also like a group of other male police officers just a few feet away, the female officer makes Jayson get down to his knees and he handcuffs him. And then she demands that he give all the money, or $40 in cash that he had in his wallet, and his gold watch. Jason's like, I'm not giving you my watch. Like, no. But eventually, he does give him the $40 in cash that he had in his wallet. She then uncuffs him, and by all accounts, the officers, the group of them, then sort of begin to walk away. Because Jayson is so drunk at that point, Steven says, listen, just stay right here. Don't move. I'm going to go find the car. And once I find it, I'll come find you. And so he's walking down the street, and so within a few minutes or so, Steven finds the car, and then he makes his way back to where he left his brother. But when he gets back, Jayson is gone. At first, he wasn't like, oh my God, he's missing. It was more of like, he is drunk. He probably just, maybe he's thrown up down an alley somewhere. Maybe he's leaning up against a wall. Maybe he's sitting on a curb and you just couldn't see him amongst the crowd. But he searched and searched and searched. Could not find him. Then their friend Michael, he ends up leaving the bar sometime after this. And as Michael is walking down the same streets that Jayson and Steve had been walking down, he looks over and he sees a cop car. And there is a driver, there is an officer in the passenger seat, there's two officers in the back seat, and in the middle of them, he swears on his life that in the middle, between those two officers in the back of the police car, is Jayson. And he looks lost and confused, and it looks like his hands are behind his back, like he's been cuffed. The car then just takes off, and the friend Michael doesn't see him again. Michael meets up with Steve. Michael tells him what he just saw. They find another officer, and they say what, Michael just saw, and the officer's like, well, if anything, he's probably been picked up, and he's at the station. But Jayson wasn't in jail. I guess they went to the jail, I think, and he wasn't there. And there was a reason for that, because at 3:40 a.m., this is literally just like an hour and a half, 2 hours or so maybe after the whole incident with bumping into the officer, the badly beaten body of Jayson Artis is found kind of on the side of this dirt road. And Jayson was dead. This was 3 blocks from where he was last seen at this, street full of bars. Within 2 days, the American consulate contacts Jayson's family and says that unfortunately, your loved one died from a very tragic hit and run. But based on what Michael saw and based on what the encounter Steve noticed with the officers, the family didn't believe this was the case. They didn't believe that he died in a hit and run. They believed he may have been killed by these cops. They requested a copy of the autopsy report. Jayson's family did. They got it. It was in Spanish, and so they had to have it translated. And so eventually they found that there were injuries to his body that were not consistent with a hit and run. There were also no injuries where there should have been injuries. He had no injuries to the lower half of his body. Pretty much where a car would have likely struck him was maybe kind of mid-body or below, but he had no broken bones in his legs, hips, anything like that. No injuries whatsoever. He also had these 5-inch long gashes or marks along his body that were not remotely consistent with being struck by a car. The autopsy report stated that Jayson had been struck so hard in the chest by this car, which again is unusual, that it actually ruptured his heart. However, there were no physical injuries to his chest, at least not injuries that would have indicated such a strong blow that his heart ruptured. If his heart ruptured because he was struck in the chest by a car, you would see a lot more injuries than were present. So the show Unsolved Mysteries, they got in contact with 3 pathologists, and they had all 3 of them examine the autopsy report and whatever photos of the body they were able to get access to. One of the pathologists actually ended up agreeing with the autopsy report from the coroner in Mexico that it was a hit and run. However, the other 2 said absolutely not. This was the injuries on his body from what we can see in the photos. The injuries notated in the autopsy report are all extremely inconsistent with a hit and run. These injuries and what they're showing in the report are way more consistent with a beating, as if he had been struck with blunt force objects and if he had been kicked and punched. And it almost appeared that Jayson had been on the ground when these injuries were given to him, meaning, and the theory is that he was surrounded by these cops, at least 4 of them, who were just beating the living shit out of him while he was on the ground and eventually killed him. Then they think that it's possible, but because they killed him, they needed to cover it up and they ran him over with their car. just to make it look like a hit and run. He had injuries to his head that never should have occurred based on the way they described that he was hit by a car, the Mexican authorities. There's no way he would have had these injuries to his head based on the way they said he was struck. These injuries to his head were, again, extremely consistent with being physically beaten upon the head with a blunt force object. The authorities in Mexico said this was an accident. It was a hit and run. The officers were never questioned. They were never even identified, actually. No one actually knows what officer specifically did this. Some investigator or detective in Mexico basically stood by his officers, said there was no arrest records for this guy. We even checked different variations of the spelling of the name because Jayson was spelled with a Y in this case. And so they tried putting it in that way and also without the Y. And the detective in Mexico said we couldn't find him, so he wasn't booked and he wasn't arrested. So the friend who said he saw him in the cop car saw someone else, wasn't him. Right, because definitely crooked cops and bad cops are certainly going to do everything by the book, I'm sure. He was in the cop car. Doesn't mean they actually arrested him. All it really means is that they kidnapped him and they brought him out to some field and killed him. All because what? He bumped into one of their officers, maybe got a little smart-mouthed with them because he was drunk. Ah, yes. Power. Gotta love having power, right? And being able to do whatever the hell you want. But as far as the Mexican authorities are concerned, this case is closed. It was an accidental hit and run, and it's over with. It's done. His family, however, don't believe that. They believe he was killed, and quite honestly, it really does sound like he was murdered. Apparently, after Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode featuring this case, a Tijuana Police Department representative came up with a binder of over 200 photographs of police officers from that time frame. They brought it to the American consulate, and then Steven and Michael were to look at all those photos to see if they could identify the female officer they bumped into. I don't know if they actually identified her or not, but as of after that, nothing else has been done in this case. There's been no updates. There's been no breakthroughs. There's been nothing. The investigation, the actual formal investigation into Jayson's case was officially deemed completely closed and over by the year 2000. But his family is still looking for the truth. But in all honesty, if we're just being realistic here, that truth will probably never come out because these were police officers who were all banded together, standing up for one another. They're going to hide each other's secrets. This is probably things they do often, which is what happens here in the States too. And they'll never be held accountable. I mean, let's just be unfortunately real here. And Jayson and his family will very likely never get the justice that he really, truly deserves. But that is it for this case. True Crime Maroony Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As I said at the beginning, please subscribe, give this video a like, and hit the bell and all that jazz. Then follow me over on TikTok if you want to. Check out the merch store and recommend a case to my email address. And I'm going to just sign off now because my back is in excruciating pain. And that's why this video is a little shorter than usual, because sitting down is very painful. So, toodaloos, True Crime Maroony Doodles. Nope, that was a failure. You got it, Mike. Okay, ow.